So once again, good afternoon, and thank you to everyone. The session is going to be quick paced, but hopefully informative. And again, my thanks to the department for putting this all together. Let me do a quick introduction of staff who will be speaking. The first will be Katie Angerone, who is the Associate Commissioner for Science and Policy at the Department of Environmental Protection. Her office provides scientific support to programs across the department, as well as other state agencies. Katie has worked at the DEP for more than 20 years and has dealt with such issues as land use management and policies, stormwater management, habitat protection, flood hazard area controls, and the protection of the Highlands region. So obviously, that's a broader way of issues dealing with that all impact municipalities. The second speaker will be Gabriel Mann, who is the Bureau Chief for the Bureau of Stormwater Permitting. Gabriel is a licensed professional engineer who is responsible for managing the Water Quality Management Program, the NJPDES Industrial Stormwater Permitting Program, and the Municipal Stormwater Regulation Program. Up third will be Alexis Taylor, who is the project manager for the Stormwater Infrastructure Toolkit project, currently working for the department's Division of Resilience, Engineering and Construction. Previously, Alexis had worked for Rebuild by Design. Many of you might be familiar with, particularly down the shore, who dealt with the impacts of climate change in the aftermath of Hurricane Sandy, both in New York, New Jersey, and Connecticut. And batting cleanup among the speakers will be Taylor Copa, who is the Assistant Project Manager for the Stormwater Infrastructure Toolkit project, currently working for the Division of Resilience Engineering and Construction as well. So we have a great lineup of folks. Again, if you have any questions, I would suggest putting them into the box. Frank Marshall of the League is on, and he will be monitoring the chat box, and Terry and I will try to facilitate Q&A at the end. So once again, thank you to everyone for joining us. And with that, I will pass the ball to Katie.
Katie, before you start, this is Carrie. I just have one important announcement to make, and that is I think we should all pause for a moment and wish happy birthday to Mike Serra. And we thank him for putting this together on his special day when he could be off doing something else. So happy birthday, Mike.
Well, thank you, Carrie. Appreciate it. There isn't much more we could do on a dreary Tuesday in January, but rest assured that on a day that's much warmer and much sunnier, I'm going to take advantage of New Jersey's pristine beaches and enjoy it then. But thank you very much. 1 year older, none the wiser. But thank you very much.
All right, go ahead, Katie.
And with that, Katie.
No, that's great. That gave me time to tee up my presentation. So I'm going to share my screen, and I hopefully will not take up too much time here. So let me know. Zoom is not always my friend. Are you seeing my screen? Yes, you are. Okay.
Yes, your screen is up.
Wonderful. All right. Well, good afternoon. Happy birthday, Mike. Excuse me. And thank you for having me here today to talk about two of the issues that I'm most passionate about, water and climate change. As you know, the department is working to reduce and respond to climate change on several fronts. And when we talk about our work, we talk about it in two categories: reducing greenhouse gases, often referred to as climate mitigation, and responding to resilience, to impacts, otherwise known as climate resilience. So spurred by executive orders issued by Governor Murphy, we've done quite a bit on both responding and reducing. And here I'm showing some of the foundational products that are helping guide our work. But today we're here to talk specifically about our response to climate change, what we are working on, and what tools we have that can help your communities be more resilient. Specifically, we're going to discuss infrastructure, which I think of as the infrastructure that's often invisible until there's a problem. When we think of water infrastructure, we tend to think about drinking water and wastewater, but not so much about the critical systems that carry stormwater off. Stormwater assets are not owned or managed like any other water infrastructure in the state. In fact, they can be a bit of a patchwork. And as I said, that results in them not being terribly visible. But this summer, With several torrential rain events, including the remnants of Henri and Ida in many communities, it became visible as stormwater systems were overwhelmed. And because we often don't even know where our assets are, it's difficult to diagnose these issues. Now, it may be tempting to dismiss the events of this summer as once in a lifetime, but that is not what the science is telling us. In fact, 2 recent studies conducted in partnership with Cornell's Northeast Regional Climate Center looked at rainfall data over the last 19 years in New Jersey, and here's what they found. The current data being used for stormwater planning and permitting does not accurately reflect precipitation intensity conditions in our state, particularly for the 24-hour and 48-hour storm events. In fact, these events are anywhere from 2.5% to 10% higher. And with regard to future precipitation, assuming a moderate greenhouse gas emission scenario, rainfall amounts for the 100-year 24-hour storm could increase by more than 20% by 2100. Projected changes will be greater in the northern part of the state than in the southern and coastal areas, with projections for some of the northwestern counties seeing the greatest increase by as much as 50%. That's a lot of rain. So today's infrastructure is not ready for the increased storm intensity that we are already experiencing. And yesterday's development, much of which was constructed in some cases before we even regulated stormwater, is definitely not ready. So the problem isn't on the horizon, it's here. We saw that last summer. And the first step in problem solving is understanding the scope of the problem itself. This means understanding your system and the assets that it's comprised of, and then prioritizing needs. So based on sound science like this, the department will be amending our rules and helping communities evaluate climate vulnerabilities in their master planning. So today you'll hear from 2 DEP experts who will help you understand what the state is doing to address stormwater, what you can do at the municipal level to mitigate risk, and what tools like the ones shown on this screen are available to help you make your community more resilient. But before I hand it over to them, I'm going to ask you to do 2 things as you listen. First, keep an open mind. These aren't easy problems, so the solutions aren't always easy either. It's worth remembering that there are real costs that your community and your constituents are already incurring because of stormwater issues, whether it's harmful algal blooms, nuisance flooding, or more serious flooding. Businesses and people are already feeling the pinch in lost customers, lost wages, unfortunately lost lives, flood damaged property, mold remediation, or flood insurance. But you can take bold action to mitigate risk. And as per Moody's, taking action to do so is credit positive. So that brings me to my second ask. Remember that water doesn't abide political boundaries, and climate change is the biggest threat of our time to our communities, to our economy. Big problems need big shared solutions. So why go it alone? Genuinely consider regional or cooperative action. Explore partnerships with upstream and downstream municipalities and even private partnerships. I know it's hard in a home rule state, but you can see it around the nation. It works, and I refuse to believe that it can't work here. As awful as climate change is, we're all going through it together. Let's leverage that. So I'll finish by saying that the department is glad to be here and glad to be your resource. Thank you.
All right, we go, thank you, Katie. I believe we go right into Gabriel now.
Yes, thank you. As Mike said, my name is Gabriel Mann. I am the Bureau Chief of the Bureau of Municipalities Stormwater Permitting and Water Quality Management, which includes the state's MS4 program. So I'm going to go over a little bit about some updates of things that we've done in the past, what we're doing now, and where we're going in the future. First thing I want to touch on is some previous amendments we adopted to the stormwater management rules. Many of you, I'm sure, are familiar with this. We proposed these amendments back in 2018, and they were finally published in the Register on March 2nd of 2020. They came with a 1-year delayed operative date, which meant they didn't really become operative until March 2nd of 2021. And until then, the old rules were still in effect. Now, we're into 2022 here, so these rules are in effect now at this point. Part of the reason for that delayed operative date was for projects that were well in the pipeline to be completed, because as you know, some of these stormwater management designs can be very complicated and costly to put together. So we wanted to get those through the pipeline, but also municipalities are required to have a stormwater control ordinance through our MS4 program. And the 1 year is the same time frame which we gave the municipalities to update their stormwater control ordinances. Now, last time I ran the numbers, about 35% of our municipalities have not yet notified us of having updated their ordinance. So if you've updated your ordinance but haven't informed us of that, please do so we can put that into our information. And if you haven't, please look into doing this as soon as possible, as it's almost a year beyond the date when it was required to be done. Go on to the next slide, please. So these rules largely required the use of green infrastructure. So we often call this the green infrastructure rule. The previous rules required you to use non-structural measures to the maximum extent practicable, which was a pretty subjective standard and became hard to enforce in the long run. So this switches it from being that subjective standard to just objectively requiring someone to use green infrastructure. So green infrastructure has to be used to satisfy the three main requirements of our stormwater management rule, and that's the quality of your discharge, the quantity of your discharge, as well as maintaining groundwater recharge on site. If we're talking about recharge and quality, that has to be done with small scale green infrastructure systems. So to get to small scale, we have limited drainage areas for those. And then for the quantity control, which is the 2, 10, and 100-year storms, which can be much larger, we allow large scale green infrastructure BMPs. But overall, everything needs to be green infrastructure to manage these going forward. Under these rules, green infrastructure means a stormwater management measure that manages stormwater close to its source by treating stormwater runoff through infiltration, by treating stormwater runoff through filtration by vegetation or soils, or storing that stormwater for reuse. A question I get here a lot of times is, why doesn't it say anything about evapotranspiration? While it doesn't explicitly say that, that is covered by the number 2 here, things that treat by vegetation or soil. So that includes anything that you can think of, like rain gardens or green roofs, things like that are all considered green infrastructure. The rules do also allow someone to use an alternative design, so it doesn't have to exactly follow our BMP manual, but keeping in mind that if anyone uses an alternative design, it still needs to meet the rules, so it needs to meet that definition, it needs to meet the drainage area limit in order to be considered green infrastructure and meet these rules. So that's some of the old stuff that we've done. Go ahead to the next slide. And these are some things that our MS4 program has due around now or just passed. So first, like I mentioned, is the revised stormwater control ordinance. That was due last March. If you haven't done that, please look into it. Another thing to note there is that municipalities that were in the Pinelands were unable to adopt a revised ordinance yet because the Pinelands were updating the CMP at the same time. But that, I believe, has been completed at this point. So now the Pinelands should be coming out with a model ordinance that you can use if you're in the Pinelands to revise your ordinance. The other thing that's big that's been due recently is our electronic outfall pipe map requirement. So it's always been a requirement in our program to have an outfall pipe map, but by December of 2020, municipalities were required to submit those outfall pipe maps to us in an electronic format. Still similar to the ordinance, there's about 30 to 35% of municipalities that have not provided us with that. So if you haven't done that yet, make sure you have someone send that in to us soon. Just a reminder, annual reports are due May 1st annually, so that's going to be coming up soon. And the last thing on here is replies to any audit letter from NJDEP. So over the last 6 years or so, we've audited about 50 or 60 municipalities MS4 programs, and there are a handful that have not yet replied to our audit letters. So if you're one of those that was audited, please make sure you've submitted a reply to our audit letter. Okay, go to the next slide. A few additional things I want to touch on is, and this ties back to the mapping of the outfalls that I mentioned. We have a free smartphone-based GIS mapping app that's available for municipalities to use. So like I said, it's smartphone-based. There's no need for any special equipment or anything. You can use it right on your phone. And even if your municipality doesn't have any ArcGIS online licenses, which are required to use the tool, we can loan those licenses out to you. So that can be loaned out to municipal staff for you to use for a longer term project, or we can even loan them on a very temporary basis if you were to do something like a watershed group and having them help you map your assets. We could loan a number of licenses out for that sort of event, and then they could be turned back to us when the event's over. Additional things we should touch on is upcoming potential rule amendments. So like Katie talked about, we have those recent studies that talk about what the new rainfall data is and what it's going to look like out in the future. And we're going to be incorporating that at some point into our regulations. The way we're going to do that is, right now, like I mentioned earlier, we look at the 2, 10, and 100-year storms. And this is now going to require that, first of all, those 2, 10, and 100-year storms, you look at the updated data. And we're also going to add a requirement that you can, or that you're required to look at both the existing 210 and 100-year storms, as well as those projected by those studies out to 2100, to make sure that your basin, or the basin that's being designed, will provide the same level of protection throughout its lifespan. And then, of course, there's other changes that we've stakeholdered that are going to be in the NJ Pact proposal, like amendments to what's required in the municipal stormwater management plan and other things. And then there's additional other changes that we previously stakeholdered. We once called that phase 2 of the stormwater rules that we were doing. It's all going to be mostly rolled together now at this point. So that's things that were previously stakeholdered, like tackling dam maintenance, which was a thing that was ongoing with a lot of agencies. And sorry, blanking out right now, but there's a bunch of things that we stakeholder there, like, oh, unifying the definition of major development, looking at the minimum size of an orifice. So things that were going to change in the stormwater management rules, more technical things that we all previously stakeholdered. So those additional rule amendments are on the table, and we should keep that in mind. Also talking about redevelopment and how we're going to handle that going forward. And it is right now, for water quality in particular, we allow a lower standard for redevelopment. So we're looking into making it a requirement that redevelopment and development be treated the same when it comes to water quality treatment. Another big thing on the horizon is the MS4 permit renewal. Our MS4 permit is set to expire at the end of this year. So we're undertaking the renewal, and you should expect to see a pre-draft of the new permit to be shared with the public in the relative near future. Okay, we can go on to the next slide. Last thing I really want to touch on is the stormwater utility law. In 2019, the Clean Stormwater and Flood Reduction Act was signed into law, and this allows local and county governments and certain utilities to form stormwater utilities. Part of this also required the DEP to create guidance, and that guidance needed to include technical assistance for establishing a utility, how to establish fees and credits, the development of an asset management program for stormwater management systems, and the development of guidance for stormwater management related public education and outreach. So number 4, our website already had a lot of information on public education and outreach, as that's already a requirement of our MS4 program. But we did create a new website, which the link is there below, that really covers the technical assistance for establishing a stormwater utility and the establishment of fees and credits if you're looking into establishing a stormwater utility. And on top of that, we have some information there on asset management, but the bulk of that asset management guidance is going to come from the next part of the presentation that we're talking about, the toolkit, because the toolkit is going to be much better and more robust than anything we were going to include in our guidance on asset management. So with that, I'll turn it over.
Thank you, Gabriel. Before we move on, I can go back to Katie, just out of curiosity. In your presentation, there was a picture. It was an urban area that obviously had just been hit impact pretty significantly by the storm. Was that Hoboken?
I would have to check the stock photo. I will find out for you, Mike. My guess is yes.
It was, yeah. It was
okay. It looked familiar, and it kind of brings this all into perspective as to what we're dealing with.
Good, then it was 100% intentional, and I didn't take it from another presentation at all.
Understood. But it was effective. We're moving on to deal with the stormwater toolkit, and we have 2 more speakers. And Kerry tried to trick me up here because the first speaker is Alexis Taylor, and the next person is Taylor Copa, and it's always tricky. You try to trick a moderator of a session to make someone's back-to-back speakers last name first name is the same. But
No, it's right.
Yeah.
You can refer to us as the before and the after.
Well, Alexis Taylor will be doing an outline of the toolkit's purpose of the DEP Stormwater Toolkit, and Taylor is going to do a walkthrough of the toolkit. So they're going to tag team kind of walking you through that process. So Alexis, I believe you're up next.
Yep. Good afternoon, everyone. So in response to the climate challenges that were raised by Katie in her introduction, we've created a stormwater infrastructure toolkit, which is a set of voluntary practices. It compiles best management resources and tools for operations and maintenance. It's a free resource and it can be voluntarily referenced at any time. It was fully published on DEP's website in the fall of 2021. And I'm going to ask my colleague to include the direct link to the website in the chat. But you can also just go ahead and Google NJDEP Stormwater Infrastructure Toolkit, and it will take you to that link. What we're going to share with you today are practical on-the-ground tools, and these can be implemented starting tomorrow. Of the 4 categories that you see in the right-hand corner of this slide, you can implement one or all 4 of them. It can be done with or without the use of consultants. And we've designed the tools really to be adaptable based on your capacity. In terms of the intended audience for this website, the content is designed for city managers, DPWs, superintendents, stormwater coordinators, floodplain managers, and municipal engineers and planners. So why asset management? Well, we all know that the infrastructure in this state is aging. Even more so with climate change, these assets are essential to protecting public health as well as for economic development. So what comprehensive asset management includes is building an inventory of your assets, scheduling and tracking your maintenance tasks, and also managing your budgeted and actual annual expenses and revenue. And doing all of these things will help you determine what your system's future needs are. These are best practices with or without the intent of forming a stormwater utility. So in whatever route you go in terms of who will be overseeing future stormwater asset management activities, this is really a first step, that you can take in order to make those future decisions. Implementing asset management will help you identify all the assets that a municipality has, how long they're going to last, and how much it's going to cost to repair, rehabilitate, or replace them. And all of this information will allow municipalities and/or utilities to see financial projections over 5 years from now or even 10 years from now. So knowing how much money is needed to fund maintenance and investment in assets will help the municipalities determine if the rates or other revenue generating mechanisms are enough. Having a complete asset inventory is a definite first step in identifying any future needed upgrades. So with that, I'm going to hand it off to my colleague, Taylor Copa, and she's going to walk you through the website step by step to take you through those 4 resources.
Thank you, Alexis. So I'm just going to share my screen right now. Great. So as we know, stormwater systems are getting frequent use every time it rains. So as rainfall events increase, maintenance will become more and more critical. Incorporating some best management practices for O&M can reduce flooding impacts by allowing the water to flow out of the area with less challenges. So I'm sure you're all familiar with and have stormwater assets within your municipalities, such as gray infrastructure, any inlets, pipes, culverts, or green infrastructure, bioswales, retention basins. So I'll go through how to access the resources within the toolkit website for asset management plans, information on software out there to help track and manage your stormwater assets, different types of O&M entity structures, and the last tab here is jobs training, so training opportunities for maintenance. So the first one we're going to look at is asset management. So we all get stormwater runoff. Where do we want it to go? So the pages in this first tab called Asset Management describe steps to create a plan and provide additional resources for you to use as well. So to maintain our vehicles, we usually get an oil change every so often, air up our tires. So how often do we clean out our stormwater drains? pipes, or culverts? What's your game plan for maintenance of your stormwater assets? Do you check them twice a year, pre and post storm events? Maybe not at all. So your asset management plan would be your game plan. So first you can ask yourself some core questions. So on our asset management homepage right here, you can scroll down, there's some additional information, and there's some core questions that you can ask. For example, what's the current state of your stormwater asset and which assets are critical? So with those answers, it'll help you form your scope and goals. So do you want to reduce the amount of water in the area within a certain time period after it rains, or maybe reduce the number of calls received? So you want to think about what you want to achieve and if or what amount of funding is available. And there are some resources here as well. You can click on the additional links here. So we also have information here if you'd like to create a risk-based plan, which focuses on the level of risk if an asset fails, and you can prioritize your plan accordingly. In addition, we also have resources for forming a stormwater asset management program. All right, so now that you have an idea of what you want to achieve and how much funding is available to do so, you'd want to figure out where your stormwater assets are located. So let's look at the Asset Management Tools tab for resources to help. So you can check out this tab. And do you know where all of your pipes, culverts, or basins are located? If you are, you can start with some of those areas. If you're not aware, but you are aware of areas that flood, you can start there. You can start small. So by adding one asset to the list when it's being maintained or maybe being fixed, and little by little, you'll end up with your full list of stormwater assets over time. So there's many asset management software programs out there to help you keep track of your stormwater assets or track work orders. So information on what types of programs are out there, what they do, and how they can be used are included in these web pages. So since we've done a lot of research, we wanted to ensure that you all benefited from that. So we created an asset management software assessment tool where you can answer a few questions for what type of software program you're looking for. And then based on your answers, it recommends some examples. So it's located under the asset management software page under the Asset Management Tools tab. So I figured we could just run through a quick example. So it'll ask you questions such as, how many stormwater assets are owned and managed by your organization? So you could say 1 to 10,000 for an example. How many direct users of the software do you envision? Maybe 2 or 3. What is the size of the population that your stormwater assets serve? Say less than 25,000. And what's the budget? We could say less than 50,000. Do you have an information technology department in-house that's capable of hosting web-based software? I could say no. Do you require the software to aid in asset risk evaluation or capital planning now or in the future? Maybe not now, but maybe in the future. Do you require the software to have a mobile component to address issues in the field now or in the future? Maybe you do want that. Does your stormwater collection system contain assets such as pipes and catch basins that exist outside of a building and you'd need it to integrate with GIS? So maybe we'll say yes. And does your organization require it to interact with other business systems, for example, financial? So we could say no. So based on our answers, the page displays software programs that can accomplish the tasks checked in the table. So in this example, it's under the basic tier. So it recommends some software programs down here, these two, and it has a list of more software programs that were not evaluated as part of this toolkit, but might be applicable based on the answers provided. So if you're interested in seeing other recommended software programs, maybe for the standard or advanced, you can scroll down and click below, and you can see the other options here. So there's also software programs that can be installed for specific assets to show you their status remotely. So this is under the Asset Management Technology webpage. For example, if you have a pump station program or a SCADA system, can allow you to view the status of the pump station from the web. So for example, in the Rebuild by Design Meadowlands project, we'll be installing a SCADA system for a pump station. So the status of the pumps, the generator, the water elevation at the site could be viewed remotely from a computer. Internet of Things allows Bluetooth devices to connect and interchange data. So for example, a refrigerator that can report its contents to a smartphone app, or the use of a home smart speaker to control lighting and climate control. So there's information in this webpage if you're interested in learning more. So now that you have your scope, your goals, funding, assets identified, and starting to track them, the third tab labeled Management Entity provides information on adjusting, revising, and expanding existing stormwater management operations and improving services. So information in this webpage is presented in Q&A format. Some under the state of stormwater management. So this would have Q&As, for example, what is green stormwater management? And questions on how to improve. For example, what is a stormwater utility? Are they possible in New Jersey? And more information. So as Gabe had mentioned earlier, so the DEP's Department of Water Quality has additional information on stormwater utilities. So learning how to maintain stormwater infrastructure is important. So if a pipe is properly maintained, the hope is that it'll work better and last longer. It's the hope, at least. So the fourth tab, labeled Jobs Training, was created to address the challenge of transferring knowledge of operations and maintenance. So these web pages contain links to trainings and certification opportunities. So you can either browse through the web pages, or you can check out our Jobs Training tool, which is located on the right-hand side here, which will direct you to the web page most applicable to what you're looking for. So we can run through an example right now. So for example, who's primarily responsible for or manages O&M? So we could say it's the municipality. Does the contractor provide or support the O&M services? Say no. And what are you seeking training for? So general, stormwater training, green infrastructure, or gray infrastructure. So we could say green infrastructure. So under results, the tool provides a link to the web page most applicable. In this case, for green infrastructure training. So if you click that, it'll take you directly to the page most applicable, and it lists all of, some of the training opportunities that are on our website. So one cool resource is a maintenance card template, and it's located under the Jobs Training tab. The template can be downloaded in Microsoft Word with the download tool button. You can fill it in with maintenance information and keep it for reference when conducting operations and maintenance. For example, if you have a bioretention basin, you can download the template, include a photo or two, where it's located, how often someone needs to check for debris, what vegetation should be there, any permit requirements, or notes for next time. And there's two sides. But these templates can be tweaked in Microsoft Word to meet your needs. So there's also instructions available for download here on the right in PDF. So now that you're familiar with the Stormwater Toolkit and the resources within these web pages, please check it out forward to others. And again, we have the link put into the chat box as well. And we hope it proves to be a valuable resource. So at this point, I'll pass it over to Carrie Flew.
Thank you, everybody. That was great. Mike, I'm not sure how you want to handle the questions. Should we go through the chat first and then you want to encourage?
Sure. Frank Marshall, who, if folks aren't familiar with Frank, he's our Associate General Counsel, and he deals with most of our land use and environmental, particularly regulatory issues. So Frank, are you on?
Yeah, I'm here, Mike.
Frank, I know you were monitoring the box, and we're right on time. It looks like we have about 22 minutes, so I think we have enough time. I saw there was a question from Andrea from West Windsor, and I saw there's some links being dropped. So can you kind of walk through any outstanding questions in the box?
Yeah, so I guess I'll start with the first one from Andrea in West Windsor. So she says, in West Windsor, we experienced major flooding due to the Millstone River. This happened across the Millstone River Basin, across many towns and counties. We just passed a resolution asking for a look at what infrastructure can be improved by the state across the basin. How can we proceed to work to make this happen? So I don't know if there's quite necessarily an answer for that, but if anyone has, if Carrie wanted to jump in with someone,
I can take that one. Today we were really focused on stormwater, but riverine flooding is a huge issue. We certainly know that. And I think that kind of maybe prompts us to have another session at another time with the right folks in the room. We feel your pain. It was a really difficult summer for a lot of communities. And we know that, and our commissioner has got a lot of irons in the fire to try and help you out, whether it is re-envisioning a Blue Acres program or taking that same precipitation data and making sure that we are addressing our flood hazard rules with it. That is definitely on our mind. When I talk about the precipitation that we're experiencing now and the design standards are not up to par, I mean that for flood as well. I think the commissioner came out right after Ida and said we weren't ready. So I would expect to see some regulatory changes addressing elevations and really where our floodplains are. Unfortunately, our FEMA flood products are backward looking. They don't look forward. And in a lot of parts of the state, they're out of date. So we know that, and we know that folks need help, and we're absolutely committed to working on it.
Thank you, Katie. And Andrew, I know you're on. If there's any follow-up?
Hi. Yes, my question is more one of we're going to need infrastructure. I know we can change the rules, but there's only so much new construction going on. And I think we're looking for something like help with the state putting in various pieces of infrastructure along the river basin, whether that's going to be some kind of retention basins, whether that's going to be some kind of gardens, other places for river to flow, but it really needs to be done along the entire river and not just in one town here or there to take off some of the extra water that comes from all these storms. So I think we're looking for something almost like an Army Corps of Engineer project. I know it's been looked at before and they kind of said, well, the problem doesn't give enough, it doesn't cost enough, so we're not going to work on it. I think there are some solutions that have even been identified, but I think now is the time that we actually have to go forward and look at them.
So yeah, unfortunately, we don't have the right people in the room, but Carrie, if we could maybe put her in contact. Yeah.
What I think, Andrea, I said to reach out to me, and what we can do is arrange a meeting and try to have some of those discussions, get our technical people in, in front of you so we can figure out the best path forward.
Thank you. I'll send you a copy of the resolution and then we can probably set something up too. Thank you.
All right, you bet.
All right, Frank. Any other, I see Mayor Conaway just dropped one, but any that came in before the mayor?
No, there's none, but just to alert folks that that dropped in the chat here were the links to everything that the DEP was talking about here with the toolkits for the different, as long with the rainfall studies. So if you wanted to just copy those, and I'm sure we can make those available to everyone as well who needs them, but those are available in the chat. So if you want to take a look at those. So one of the other questions that we came in here from the mayor, will federal infrastructure law have funding to address local stormwater issues?
So, I'm gonna lean on Gabe a little bit on this one, but there's a lot of federal funding coming down the pike, including American Resource Plan funding. That funding is a little easier to use on planning and then the dollars that are coming down from the bipartisan infrastructure deal. That will be coming through to the state, and I believe we just did a press release on it last week, so maybe someone can drop that that in the chat. We are doing engagement sessions on that right now. We have still not heard from EPA on exactly what the parameters around using some of that money will be, but we'll be running it through our state revolving fund. So we do offer that money for stormwater infrastructure. It must result in a capital improvement, if I'm saying that right, Gabe. So yes, there is some funding. I'll also note that I believe yesterday we put out an RFP for 319 funding, or water quality restoration funding. That is also available for stormwater. So maybe we could throw that in the chat as well.
Okay. Frank, give me anything, any other? I see some more things have dropped into the box. It's hard for me to see because when I'm running the meeting.
No, I have one here from Barbara Rogers. I think she was referring back to the when the question was being answered about the river flooding, or can we do this at the watershed level? We are in Stony Brook Millstone watershed with West Windsor. So I think, Katie, that was in reference to the answer you were giving.
I can answer that one. So in fact, where we have piloted this stormwater infrastructure toolkit is across 5 towns in the Meadowlands. And because it is really kind of a systems approach, it can be scaled up to the watershed, and we would definitely encourage that. What we discovered by doing an asset inventory in those 5 towns, not only was it helpful in identifying kind of who was responsible for which components in the system, but it also allowed us to find the kind of optimal point of intervention. And oftentimes that was upstream of where the actual problem area was occurring. And so I would definitely recommend this is something that can be done across municipalities at a watershed planning level. And we've had some success doing that, again, across 5 towns in the Meadowlands.
And Alexis, I'll just add that we've seen in states like Maryland, in Philadelphia, and other states across the nation that addressing this together is easier. And most definitely that is often how stormwater utilities are formed together.
And there is another question. I'm not sure if this could be answered by the folks on the call here today, but this is from Berkeley Heights Township. How do we put a case to dredge the Passaic River, which spans multiple counties, before the Army Corps of Engineers? The rising river levels, in part because of rainfall, but also debris in the river, cause terrible flooding in many of our towns, and we cannot tackle this alone or even with other towns. This is a state level issue.
Yeah, Frank, I think you hit the nail on the head. And Carrie, it sounds like we need our Army Corps friends at one of these in future.
Yes, I think so. But once again, my office can facilitate meetings and discussions of this nature, with any of our technical people. And I believe the director of the program actually is on the phone. I don't know if he's still there, but But yes, we can reach out to the program people. Just reach out to me. I put my email in the address. You all should have that anyway. You're here for me every Friday. But please feel free to reach out and we'll set a meeting up for you. And talk to our Army Corps liaisons.
Yeah, and that unless anyone else has another question to add here at the last minute, I think that that's all of them.
All right, going once, going twice. Looks like we're coming in ahead of schedule. Again, Carrie and Emily and so all the staff, Katie and all the speakers that thank you for lending your expertise and your time. Very productive. Again, this is being recorded and we will have it posted on our website shortly. Yes, we will share the link for the recording. Actually, I got that chat message. The rest I was having trouble with. But yes, we'll be sharing all the information. We'll also include a copy of the PowerPoint on the website as well. So anyway, thank you all for taking your time and have a great day and see you for the 4th lunch and learn. Stay tuned. Have a great day, folks.
Bye, everyone.